So, what's up guys, I am BlackOpsAmazing, welcome back to another zombies video where today with the new timeline we have the full explained story of Mob of the Dead. Hopefully you enjoy the video. As always, if you do, a like rating would be very much appreciated. Make sure you are subscribed for more zombies videos on the channel. Don't miss a single one. And without further ado, when you're ready, let's get straight into the video. Here we go. So with the full timeline being released by Treyarch of Zombies, we can finally explain all of the storyline, and specifically for this video, Mob of the Dead, one of the most interesting stories we've ever had, to do with the afterlife purgatory. And there's actually so much that is missing from the story. I actually did a reminder of the Mob of the Dead story probably about 6 months ago now, and even though that was accurate, there was still a ton of information missing from there that we simply didn't know. This information what I'm about to present to you today, we have never even heard of before, so it was impossible to add it to the Mob of the Dead story. But as I said, this is the whole timeline of this map. It's very interesting, so when you're ready, let's get straight into this. On July the 18th of 1922, Salvatore Sal DeLuca opens gambling houses across Chicago, marking the beginning of the DeLuca crime family. Sal built a large empire from gambling, prostitution, and even the distribution of alcohol. And using the money he gained from this, he set up his very own mob. Almost 1 year later, on February the 17th of 1923, Billy Handsome joined the DeLuca crime family as a hitman. Since Sal rarely got involved with any kind of violence, Billy Handsome was hired to deal with his enemies, taking care of the dirty work in gruesome ways that would make the headlines. Sal would later come to look at Billy as the son he never had. As Sal's empire was underway, 7 months later on September 18th, 1923, an expert in gambling and rigging sporting events, Michael Finn O'Leary, begins working for Sal. After earning a little income from working for the DeLuca crime family, months later on March of 1924, Finn married Angelina Bow, an aspiring starlet with the delusions of grandeur. With everything going well in the DeLuca crime family and Sal earning a large income from his empire, 5 years later on March the 1st of 1929, Sal writes of his frustrations with the Chicago's finest. After many years of successful bribes with the city, it became clear that it was no longer an option. And so, because of this, Sal begins to work with Albert Al Arlington, an associate in Los Angeles known for being a master schemer and bank robber. And that was it. Sal's empire was fully up and running, hiring 3 specialist guys to work alongside him. Michael Finn O'Leary, Albert Al Arlington, Billy Handsome, and Sal DeLuca formed the Mob of the Dead crew. After working for Sal DeLuca for many months, Finn's wife Angelina finally found out what he'd been up to. She found out about his acting gambling fraud and so told Finn she wanted a divorce. But Finn told his lawyer that he wouldn't accept the divorce, saying she can leave this marriage the day she leaves this earth. And so because of this, obviously Angelina was angry and sought to some way get revenge and get rid of Finn. Almost a whole year later, on October the 11th of 1931, Sal, in need of more money, decides to join the Weasel in another LA heist. But after the heist goes wrong, the Weasel ends up waking up in hospital. While in hospital, Al submits Icarus from Mars, a publication as a comic strip, and even though it's his 3rd attempt, it's declined once again. A month later, on November the 11th, 1931, angry and frustrated with his collapsing empire, Sal kills a prostitute. No longer willing to turn a blind eye, the Chicago PD arrests him. And just a few weeks later, in an operation against the DeLuca crime family, Billy is arrested for multiple homicides. A few days after, on December 19th of 1931, Finn's wife, Angelina Bow, decides that this is the time to bring Finn down. After being arrested by the Chicago PD for operations against the DeLuca crime family, Finn's wife offers evidence against him. And then finally, along with the rest, along with the collapse of the DeLuca empire, a month later, on January 19th, 1932, Al is arrested for his role in the LA heist. Sal was found guilty of murder and was sentenced to life in prison at Alcatraz. Billy was found guilty of 116 counts of murder and was also sentenced to life in prison at Alcatraz. Finn was found guilty of 16 counts of gambling fraud and so would serve his sentence at Alcatraz. A whole month later, on June the 13th of 1932, Sal and Billy first arrive at Alcatraz Island. A few weeks later, on June the 30th, Finn arrives at Alcatraz, and then a day after, on July the 1st of 1932, Albert Al Arlington is found guilty of grand larceny, grand theft auto, arson, conspiracy, and battery, and so he would serve his sentence at Alcatraz. On August the 3rd, 1932, Al was the last member of the DeLuca crime family to arrive at the prison. All 4 characters were now imprisoned together on the Rock. On January the 1st, 1933, Stanley Ferguson began to work at Alcatraz Island. Stanley had a wife and a son named Tommy. As 4 months passed by, Stanley, being the prison guard, began to get to know all of the prisoners, and this included Sal, Billy, Finn, and Al. But as that time passed by, what Stanley Ferguson didn't know is that in fact Al was devising a plan. He was devising a plan to escape the prison. He convinced the others that they could build a plane and escape from Alcatraz. And so, seeing this as their only option and trusting Al, the 4 inmates escaped their cells. But soon enough, Al's plan began to break down, not really knowing what to do and realizing that the plane will never be completed. Embittered with rage, feeling like Al had lied to them, Sal, Finn, and Billy plot to get revenge on Al. And so on December 31st of 1933, Finn, Sal, and Billy lure Al to the rooftop, where they attack him and lead him to bleed to death. And on January 19th of 1934, 19 days after the murder of Al, the 3 inmates, Sal, Billy, and Finn, were sentenced to death by electric chair, meaning all 4 inmates would eventually meet their death. Al being killed by the other mobsters, and the other 3 put to death by electrocution. After the death of all 4 inmates, they find themselves trapped in a seemingly endless cycle, where the characters Sal, Finn, Billy, and Al are sent back to the night of the escape, in an alternate iteration of Alcatraz prison, where instead the prisoners and guards turn into zombies, and the warden, Stanley Ferguson, becomes Brutus. With no memory of Arlington's murder or the failure of the escape plan, just like they did originally, they set out to build Arlington's plane and make an attempt at freedom. However, in this endless cycle they are trapped in, this time they manage to build the plane. See, in reality this plane wouldn't fly, but since what they are trapped in is not reality, they are trapped in a cycle. When they build the Icarus plane, in this reality it can fly. The crew escape, but the plan fails. They crash into the Golden Gate Bridge, where eventually the 4 mobsters are killed. Once the mobsters are killed, they are sent back to the beginning once again, reappearing in the prison with no memory of their previous attempt, and once again try to build the plane. They do it, they successfully fly off the bridge, but because they are stuck in this endless time loop, they crash into the Golden Gate Bridge, where they die and reappear at the very beginning where they attempt to escape, resulting in the mobsters being stuck in an endless time loop with the notion of escape an impossibility. But this time with no escape, the mobsters try something else. They remember and learn that in reality, actually, they are all dead. They remember that the escape plan never came to be, and they remember that they killed Arlington. Now, knowing this, the mobsters once again try to escape off Alcatraz. They crash into the Golden Gate Bridge, but this time they set out to kill Arlington. Now, if Sal, Billy, and Finn kill Arlington, the cycle continues. Because this is what happened originally, the reason they were sent to this alternate iteration of Alcatraz is because they killed Arlington, and so doing this again means the mobsters are sent back to the night of the escape, leaving them all trapped. However, if Arlington kills Sal, Billy, and Finn, getting revenge, then the cycle is broken, which leaves Arlington free to escape and the other mobsters left trapped. Meanwhile, in reality, 6 years after the death of Sal, Finn, and Billy, on April the 16th of 1940, Ricktoffen arrives in Dimension 63, where he is contacted by members of the Illuminati, and he enlists their help to build a laboratory facility beneath Alcatraz. But not being able to do this on his own, Ricktoffen also meets Stanley Ferguson, the night guard, and convinces him to assist with the Illuminati's construction of the Alcatraz laboratory. And as construction is underway on July the 3rd, 1941, Stanley Ferguson reports that the laboratory has been completed, and that the subjects will be placed in stasis chambers upon arrival. A day later, on July the 4th, 1941, Ricktoffen returns to the lab under Alcatraz, where he meets Victus. Victus, if you don't know, is the transit crew. Misty, Stuhlinger, Russman, and Malton. After arriving from the empty Earth with the Chronorium, upon reading the Chronorium, Ricktoffen discovers numerous timelines, documenting their fates and learns about the blood vials. Ricktoffen wrote on this page, "I know what I must do." Ricktoffen then enters a rift, going all the way back to January 11th, 1934, just 11 days after Al was killed, and 8 days before the death of Sal, Finn, and Billy. Ricktoffen goes back and secures the blood samples of Sal and Finn. Since blood samples are taken upon imprisonment at Alcatraz, Ricktoffen stepped through the rift back to 1934 to acquire the blood of Sal and Finn. He then delivered the blood of these two characters to his younger self before Origins, and recovering the blood vials belonging to Victus, he returns. Victus is then placed on ice to be kept safe until they are needed next. They are put to sleep under Alcatraz. After all this happens, after seeing the death of the 4 inmates and building a lab under Alcatraz, almost a year later on October 1st, 1942, Stanley Ferguson leaves employment at Alcatraz. He retired. And that is the story of Mob of the Dead. Over a year later, on December 25th, 1943, Mr. Rapt, a reporter hired by the Shadow Man, speaks to Stanley Ferguson, where Stanley gives him a detailed account of the deaths of Arlington, Billy Handsome, Finn, and Sal. This information was wanted by the Shadow Man. Stanley, after retiring, would later go on to tell a story about the 4 inmates at Alcatraz, but his big secret about a laboratory being built under the prison by him and Ricktoffen would never be told.
My name is Stanley Ferguson. I was a guard at Alcatraz from 1933 to 1942. Today, I'm going to give you some insight into one of the more interesting tales from the prison's history. Over the decades, Alcatraz has seen more than its fair share of daring escape attempts. However, few were as audacious as the one undertaken by 4 inmates on New Year's Eve, 1933. Thought to be the brainchild of an inmate by the name of Albert Arlington, the outrageous scheme was as unlikely as its mastermind. It's believed that Arlington, aka the Weasel, somehow convinced 3 other inmates that he had devised a foolproof plan to escape the rock. It was a plan that would see them literally taking to the skies on a makeshift aircraft of Arlington's own design. Just how the Weasel managed to convince these hardened criminals that such a plan was even possible remains a mystery to this day. What is known is that no such plane was ever built. Instead, the group's plans for freedom soon descended into bitter argument and infighting. With the plan falling apart, anger and frustration would ultimately lead to a brutal altercation between the misguided Arlington and his former co-conspirators. Armed only with makeshift weapons, Finn O'Leary, Sal DeLuca, and Billy Handsome lured the unsuspecting Arlington to the roof, where they intended to exact a bloody and violent revenge. And so it was here, beneath the dark and stormy winter skies, that the hapless Arlington met his grisly end, bleeding to death on the cold concrete roof. For their participation in the murder, the 3 collaborators were sent to death by electric chair. Justice came swiftly. On the morning of January 19th, 1934, the execution order was carried out.
There we go, guys. Hopefully you have all enjoyed the video. This has been a really awesome video to make, so a like rating would be very much appreciated if you have enjoyed it. Any questions you have, make sure you leave them in the comment section below. Make sure you are subscribed if you haven't seen, and wait, what? Make sure you are subscribed for more zombies videos on the channel. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and of course, we'll see you all in the next video. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.